Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Night Striker, as part of the Operation Night Strikers collection. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. Originally from developer Taito, and with this collection handled by developer M2, Night Striker released to arcades in 1989. Now jump to August of 2025, and the Operation Night Strikers collection is available for the PC via Steam and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we're looking at today. This collection also includes Operation Wolf, Operation Thunderbolt, and Space Gun, which are all Taito light gun shooters. But we'll primarily be focusing on Night Striker today, which is a rail shooter done in that Space Harrier Super Scroller style. Overall for myself, Night Striker is worth the price of entry for the entire collection. However, the others are definitely icing on the cake. There is also console DLC available, but for the most part, I feel you can probably skip that unless you're a true fan of the retro titles. And with that said, let's dive right in. So once you've started the title, we're taken to this screen here where you can see the 4 games available in the collection. Selecting a game takes us to this screen where we see the ability to play the arcade version, and you can change between different version ROMs, and then we have the console titles that are available if you've picked up the DLC. So for Operation Wolf, for example, we have 3 different versions of consoles available. However, for the other titles, there's just one version available for each. But for the purposes of today's review, we're going to be primarily focusing on Night Striker. Selecting Night Striker, so here we have the arcade version, and we can choose between the various ROMs available on this title, which include the Japanese, the World, or the EU version. We also have a replay gallery. Basically, your replays are saved, and it keeps up to 8, with the newest replacing the oldest, but you can lock them. And lastly, we have the Mega CD version, which, although not very well regarded, I personally have really enjoyed having this one available, as I think it's a lot of fun to play and contrast between this version compared to the original arcade. With that said, firing up the arcade version. So before we actually dive into the game itself, let's take a quick moment to look over the options that are available in the pause menu. So we do have the ability to do quick saves as well as quick loads. And under the options, we have the ability to change game settings, so you can change your difficulty as well as your bonuses for shields and your base shield settings, but then controls. So although not necessarily related to Night Striker itself, but the other titles in the collection, you can use a mouse both on the Switch or the PC version to control the light gun titles, which is really awesome. However, one thing that is a little disappointing on that is that we don't have options for some of the newer light gun peripherals that are available for the PC. So it would be wonderful if they were to add those in there, but not very likely. Also, another thing to note, the Switch 2 mouse controllers are not supported by this particular title. We also have the options to change a few other settings that are available for the particular title itself, including changing the color of our homing bullets, which I'll explain when we get into the gameplay. And since this is an M2 title, we have the M2 gadgets. I usually want to have all these turned on for any title that they do, as I love the information it provides. Basically, this is additional information that's provided on both the left and right sides of your screen. And under screen, we have all these options for screen side type, so you can go with pixel perfect. This is a little smaller on your screen. Then we have fit to screen, full mini. You have a couple filter options with smoothing and scan lines, and some wallpaper options as well. We also have a game manual, some in-game achievements, and now back into the game itself. So throwing credits into the machine, since this is the arcade version that we're playing, we see here the overall opening screen. You can see that super scroller style that's being represented here, and there's some story available. If you leave the screen, or the game rather, playing through the demo section, you'll see the story that's described there. But we're basically the special ops soldier trying to go and defeat this terrorist organization using our awesome armored motor car. So comparing this one to Space Harrier is definitely really appropriate, as we can move around the screen in that same way, but we also have the ability to move on the ground. So in Space Harrier you can run on the ground. In this case, we drive on the ground. And then the game itself, I would also say, is a lot like Outrun, where we have the ability to choose between stages once we've completed a stage. So it is possible to, in the options you might have seen, to invert our controls if you're looking to go and invert both your horizontal or your vertical. It just depends on what kind of gameplay style you're looking for with your controls. But I would recommend trying out what works best for you personally. So as far as our overall controls are concerned, we have two primary shot buttons. We have our main shot button, which is will fire our laser with a single shot, and we also have our trigger shot, which is basically rapid fire. So with both, the first shot you go and fire, it's possible to get a homing shot if we go and move, and that will be represented by, if you change the setting, the color that you've set it to. So in this case, when you see a red shot, you know that's our homing shot. We're now fighting our first boss, and one of the things I love about the shot triggers is it's not possible to see the boss damage normally. However, we do have a damage gauge now on the right, and before you get to that point in the stage, we also have some information there. Talking about some of the other things now, since this game does let you choose your path, we have our path available on our left, and so we can always see what's there as well as what's next. And one thing that's really neat about the information here is we can see our running point. So overall, we're given bonus points if we continue to drive on the ground. If we start flying, you can see that the running point gauge on the left side will change. We also have our difficulty represented down there on the bottom left. The game does use a scaling difficulty system called rank, where your rank starts out at 2 or 3 depending, and then we'll scale up from there if you're playing on normal. The higher difficulties will have higher ranks overall. On the right, you can see that we can have information for the number of enemies that we've seen as well as the damage we've taken. It is possible to get both wipeouts, which are taking out all the enemies in a stage, as well as doing pacifist runs, where you're getting through an entire stage without taking any hits and defeating or no enemies throughout the course of the run. It's not possible to do pacifist on every stage, but you do get extra bonuses for achieving both of those two goals. So depending on the stage, maybe you want to aim for doing a pacifist run or doing a wipeout for the various stages to get as many points as possible. And with that, that's Night Striker served up for your enjoyment. So overall, I feel like the presentation in this particular collection is really well done. So we've got 21 stages total, and one of the things that's neat is at the end of those 21 stages, you'll get a different ending depending on which path you've taken. But there are some criticisms that I have with the title. So as far as the minus flavors are concerned, I don't feel like the base game itself has enough of a stage variety to it. We see the stages go and repeat in theme a lot, and in addition to that, we also get repeating bosses. And then let's talk a little bit about the DLC. So as I mentioned, if you're a retro fan, having those different console versions is wonderful, but I do feel that the arcade versions are superior in basically all the cases. But it can be a lot of fun to play those classic console versions as well, to just see what kind of changes were made between the arcade versions and the console versions. Though with the Mega CD, it is a little surprising that the graphics took the kind of fidelity hit they did. It's still a really fun title to play. But on the plus flavors, I definitely love an M2 title where we have things like the M2 gadgets as well as their expert touch on the emulation. So that's definitely a huge plus for the title. And then for Night Strikers, having that whole branching path system as well as the different endings at each of the 6 ends of the path is one of the real highlights for the title. And especially when you get to the last stages, every stage has something different that happens with your fighter in particular, so it definitely makes it worth it. The game, the runs are on the shorter side, so you could get through things on the quick side, but overall, that's a huge plus for me. And then the whole collection itself is just a real treat to be able to pick up and enjoy. Like I said in the introduction, for me personally, Night Striker is worth the cost of entry, and everything else is just icing on the cake. Having all those light gun shooters to try out and play is a real fun and exciting treat to be able to enjoy. And with that, we find ourselves at the end of this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. Operation Night Strikers, a solid recommend from the chef. And with that, we want to say thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.